April 17, 1986. In rural Yazoo County, Mississippi, a report was filed at the local sheriff's office concerning the disappearance of 19-year-old Martha Louise Wilkins. The young woman had not been seen by anyone in the community for nearly 8 months. What would eventually be uncovered was not a typical missing person case, but rather one of the most disturbing instances of isolation and abuse in Mississippi's history. Martha was the eldest daughter of William and June Wilkins, a farming family living on 40 acres of dense woodland property, approximately 17 miles from the nearest town. According to school records, Martha had been an above-average student who suddenly stopped attending Yazoo County High School during her senior year in September 1985. At the time, her parents informed school administrators that Martha would be completing her education through homeschooling due to personal health concerns. The spring weather on the day of the report was unusually cold for Mississippi, with temperatures hovering around 48 degrees and a heavy mist blanketing the rural countryside. This weather would significantly hamper initial search efforts. The report had been filed by Martha's maternal grandmother, Eliza Jenkins, who had become increasingly concerned after repeated attempts to contact her granddaughter were met with excuses from William Wilkins. They kept saying she was sick. Then they said she was visiting relatives in Alabama, but something didn't feel right, Eliza told authorities. I haven't laid eyes on that child since her 18th birthday. Deputy Sheriff Raymond Thornton was assigned to the case. His initial visit to the Wilkins property revealed an isolated farmhouse surrounded by dense woods with a long, unpaved driveway as the only access point. The property featured several outbuildings, including a large barn, and what appeared to be a separate cabin approximately 100 yards behind the main house. William and June Wilkins greeted authorities with visible hostility. When questioned about Martha's whereabouts, they produced a handwritten letter allegedly from their daughter, dated December 1985, claiming she had moved to Mobile, Alabama to work and start a new life. The letter contained no return address or contact information. Something felt off about the whole situation, Deputy Thornton would later note in his report. The property had an unusual security setup for a rural farm. Multiple locks on doors, windows with heavy curtains, and what appeared to be a recently installed alarm system. The initial search of the premises revealed nothing unusual in the main house, though deputies noted that the parents refused access to several rooms, citing privacy concerns. Without sufficient evidence of foul play, authorities could not obtain a warrant for a more thorough investigation at that time. Martha's few friends from high school reported that she had become increasingly isolated in the months before her disappearance. She stopped coming to social events during junior year, said former classmate Rebecca Williams. By senior year, she barely spoke to anyone. Her dad would drop her off and pick her up right at the school entrance every day, and she wasn't allowed to participate in any after-school activities. The case quickly went cold. With no body, no crime scene, and a plausible explanation from the parents, the investigation stalled. Martha Louise Wilkins was entered into the National Missing Persons Database, but with limited resources and higher priority violent crimes demanding attention, her file was soon relegated to the growing stack of unsolved disappearances. If you want to follow more cases like this, that shake entire communities and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any investigation. For nearly 7 years, the case of Martha Wilkins remained dormant. The Wilkins family continued their secluded existence, rarely venturing into town except for William, who would make monthly supply runs. June was occasionally seen at church services, but would leave immediately after, avoiding social interactions. Neighbors reported that the family had become even more reclusive after the initial investigation. The breakthrough came on October 3, 1993, when an anonymous call was placed to the Yazoo County Sheriff's Office. The female caller, who refused to identify herself, claimed to have information about Martha Wilkins. She never left, she's still on that property, but there's more to it than just her being held there, the caller stated before abruptly ending the call. By this time, Raymond Thornton had been promoted to sheriff, and he immediately reopened the investigation. The anonymous tip, combined with years of lingering doubts about the case, provided sufficient grounds to obtain a search warrant for the entire Wilkins property. On October 5, 1993, a team of 8 officers arrived at the Wilkins farm. The weather was clear, with temperatures in the mid-70s, offering optimal conditions for a thorough search. William Wilkins attempted to block the officer's access, claiming the warrant was illegal harassment, but eventually relented when faced with the possibility of arrest. The initial search of the main house yielded nothing unusual. However, when authorities approached the cabin behind the property, they discovered it was secured with 3 heavy-duty padlocks. William claimed it was a storage facility for farming equipment and chemicals that needed to be kept secure. When officers broke the locks and entered the cabin, what they discovered would shock even the most seasoned law enforcement officials. The cabin had been converted into a living space, with the windows covered by wooden boards from the inside. Inside, they found a 26-year-old Martha Wilkins and 6 children, ranging in ages from approximately 7 years old to just a few months. The conditions were deplorable, stated Officer Sarah Jenkins in her report. The space was cramped with minimal furniture. There was running water but only the most basic sanitation. The children appeared malnourished and exhibited signs of developmental delays. Most disturbing was the evidence suggesting that Martha had not left the cabin in years. Her skin was pale from lack of sun exposure, and she exhibited symptoms of severe vitamin D deficiency. Medical examinations would later confirm that she had not set foot outside the structure for approximately 8 years. The investigation quickly expanded as authorities realized the magnitude of what they were dealing with. DNA testing, still a relatively new technology in 1993, was ordered for all the children. Social services were called in, and Martha and the children were immediately removed from the property and taken to Yazoo Medical Center for evaluation. William and June Wilkins were taken into custody on initial charges of false imprisonment and child endangerment. During interrogation, they maintained that they were protecting their daughter, claiming she had mental instabilities that made her a danger to herself and others if allowed to leave the property. However, as investigators pieced together the evidence, a far more disturbing picture emerged. Medical examinations of Martha revealed years of physical and sexual abuse. The children's medical evaluations and subsequent DNA testing would uncover the most horrifying aspect of the case. All 6 children had been fathered by William Wilkins himself. This revelation transformed the investigation from a missing person case into one of the most heinous crimes in Mississippi's history. Additional charges of rape, incest, and aggravated child abuse were filed against William Wilkins. June Wilkins faced charges of accessory to these crimes and criminal negligence. The investigation faced numerous challenges. Martha, having been isolated for so long, was initially uncooperative with authorities, displaying symptoms of severe Stockholm syndrome. The children, who had never been registered with the state, no birth certificates, no social security numbers, no vaccination records, existed completely off the grid. It was as if an entire family had been erased from society, noted District Attorney Eleanor Hammond. These children were born and raised in captivity, with no concept of the outside world beyond what their grandparents allowed them to know. As investigators dug deeper into the family's history, they discovered that the isolation had begun gradually. School records showed that Martha had been a regular student until age 16, when her attendance became sporadic. Teachers had noted concerns about her withdrawn behavior, but reported that William Wilkins had always provided plausible explanations, often citing health issues. The property search also yielded disturbing evidence of long-term planning. The cabin had been modified with reinforced doors, soundproofed walls, and a crude but functional ventilation system. A hidden underground storage area contained enough preserved food and supplies to last for months without requiring trips to town. Perhaps most chilling were the journals found in William Wilkins' study, detailing his twisted ideology, combining religious extremism with paranoid fears about the outside world. The writings revealed his belief that he was preserving a pure bloodline and protecting his family from the corruption of modern society. By early 1994, the investigation had uncovered the full, horrifying scope of what had occurred on the Wilkins property. Martha's medical evaluation revealed that she had given birth to her first child at age 19, with subsequent pregnancies approximately every 14 to 18 months. Medical experts testified that she had received no prenatal care for any of the pregnancies, and all births had taken place in the cabin without professional medical assistance. The children, who ranged in age from 7 years to 6 months, displayed varying degrees of developmental delays. None had ever attended school, received medical care, or interacted with anyone outside the cabin except for William and June Wilkins. The oldest child, a boy, could barely speak in complete sentences, while the younger ones exhibited signs of severe neglect and malnutrition. These children existed in a world defined entirely by their grandparents, explained child psychologist Dr. Marianne Peterson, who was brought in to evaluate the children. They had no concept of society, no understanding of basic social norms, and extremely limited language skills. Their entire universe consisted of that single-room cabin. Perhaps the most disturbing revelation came from Martha herself, once she began to trust the counselors working with her. In sessions recorded for the prosecution, Martha explained that she had been convinced by her parents that the outside world had been devastated by a catastrophic event. "Dad told me everyone else was dead or dangerous," she stated in one recorded session. "He said we were the last normal family left, and that going outside would kill us." This psychological manipulation had been reinforced by carefully controlled evidence. William would occasionally bring back newspapers, with only certain apocalyptic-sounding headlines visible, or show Martha doctored photographs purporting to show devastation in nearby areas. With no other source of information, and after years of isolation beginning in her teens, Martha had believed these fabrications. Forensic analysis of the cabin revealed the extreme measures taken to maintain this illusion. The windows had not simply been boarded up, they had been fitted with screens that projected images of barren, seemingly contaminated landscapes. A crude speaker system had been installed to occasionally play recordings of what sounded like distant explosions or emergency sirens. The investigation also uncovered a network of individuals who, wittingly or unwittingly, had enabled the Wilkins family's crimes. A local doctor who had provided prescription medications without examining the supposed patients. A county clerk who had been bribed to avoid filing reports about the family. Several neighbors who had suspected something was wrong, but had chosen not to involve themselves. One of these neighbors, Gerald Thompson, finally came forward with critical information. "I saw lights in that back cabin sometimes, even though the Wilkins claimed no one lived there," he admitted to investigators. "Once, about 4 years ago, I heard what sounded like a child crying when I was hunting near their property line. When I mentioned it to William, he got real aggressive, said I was trespassing and threatened to shoot me if I came near his property again." Another key piece of evidence emerged when investigators discovered that June Wilkins had been maintaining a separate identity through which she ordered children's clothing, educational materials, and medical supplies via mail order. These items were delivered to a post office box in a neighboring county. As the case progressed through the legal system, more details emerged about how the Wilkins had managed to hide their crimes for so long. William had strategically cultivated a reputation as an eccentric but harmless recluse, occasionally participating in community events just enough to avoid suspicion. June had maintained connections with a small, isolated church group that emphasized patriarchal authority and minimal government interference in family matters. Leave in the comments, never give up on the truth if you believe all missing persons deserve to be found. The trial of William and June Wilkins began on April 7, 1995, in the Yazoo County Courthouse. The proceedings were closed to the public due to the sensitive nature of the case and to protect the identities of the victims. William faced 23 felony counts, including multiple charges of rape, incest, false imprisonment, child endangerment, and child abuse. June faced 18 counts as an accessory to these crimes. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Eleanor Hammond, presented over 200 pieces of evidence and called 47 witnesses, including medical experts, psychologists, and law enforcement officials. Martha Wilkins, still in the process of psychological recovery, provided testimony via closed-circuit television to avoid being in the same room as her parents. Her testimony proved devastating to the defense. Martha described in detail how her father had begun isolating her from friends and social activities at age 16, gradually limiting her contact with the outside world. By age 18, she was rarely allowed to leave the main house. After her 19th birthday, she was moved permanently to the cabin under the pretense of a temporary quarantine due to an alleged outbreak of a deadly disease in the area. At first, he would come to bring food and supplies and to teach me about surviving after what he called the collapse, Martha testified. Then one night, he came in different. He said that with everyone else gone, it was our duty to repopulate the world with pure children. The defense, facing overwhelming evidence, attempted to portray William as mentally ill and June as a victim of his control. However, this strategy collapsed when prosecutors presented June's detailed journals, which revealed her active participation in maintaining Martha's captivity and her knowledge of the ongoing abuse. Perhaps most damning was evidence that June had actively helped conceal the pregnancies and births, had taught Martha how to deliver her own children, and had participated in the elaborate deception about the state of the outside world. After a 6-week trial, the jury deliberated for just 7 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts for both defendants. On June 23, 1995, William Wilkins was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. June Wilkins received a sentence of 175 years in prison. The aftermath of the case brought significant changes to Yazoo County and to Mississippi's child protection laws. The state legislature passed Martha's Law in 1997, which strengthened reporting requirements for suspected child abuse and allocated additional resources for investigating isolated families. The Wilkins children, whose identities have been protected by court order, were placed with specially trained foster families. According to limited information released by social services, the recovery process has been challenging but showing progress. The oldest children have gradually been integrated into special education programs, while the younger ones have demonstrated greater adaptability. Martha Wilkins, now known by a new identity, underwent extensive psychological treatment and rehabilitation. According to her counselors, her integration into society has been a slow, ongoing process. Imagine believing your entire life that the world had ended, only to discover that it had been there all along, explained Dr. Peterson. The psychological adjustment required is immense. 10 years after her rescue, Martha allowed a single interview with authorities to help train law enforcement in recognizing similar cases. She described the most difficult aspect of her recovery, learning that everything I'd been taught was a lie, that there were people out there, normal life going on, while I was trapped in that cabin believing we were the last ones left. Perhaps the most powerful moment in that interview came when asked what she wanted people to know about her experience. "Check on the isolated," she said. "When families withdraw completely, when children disappear from school and activities, when someone tells you not to worry about someone you haven't seen in months, that's when you should worry the most." The Wilkins property was eventually seized by the state and demolished. Today, a small memorial garden stands at the site, dedicated to survivors of family abuse and captivity. A simple stone marker bears the inscription, "Freedom begins with being seen." William Wilkins died in prison in 2008 from complications related to cancer. June Wilkins remains incarcerated at the Central Mississippi Correctional Facility, having been denied parole 3 times. The case stands as one of the most disturbing examples of how isolation can enable abuse and how the appearance of normalcy can mask unimaginable horrors. It fundamentally changed how law enforcement in Mississippi approaches cases of family isolation and unexplained absences, particularly of young women and children. If you watched all the way through, it's because you care about these cases that mark families forever. Leave a comment saying, "I watched it all," so I can get to know you and understand who really cares about the search for truth. Please like this video and share it with others who value understanding these difficult but important stories. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already to support our work in bringing these forgotten cases to light.